welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving this very yellow 1997 Porsche 911 Turbo. It's speed yellow, which in 1997 cost an extra $3,000, which sounded like a lot at the time, but now that PTS colors cost 12 grand on top of MSRP. 3 grand for speed yellow seems pretty darn good. This turbo is so iconic because it's the most beautifully shaped wide body that I ever seen come out of the Porsche factory, despite the fact that 993s are not necessarily my favorite. 964 is now my favorite Porsche 911, except this 993 really gets the job done in a bright color. So what's the deal? We've got a 3.6 liter air-cooled twin turbo engine, an all-wheel drive system with a 6-speed manual transaxle, makes about 400 horsepower and just a hair under 400 pound-feet of torque. So that's pretty monstrous, because this amount of torque in this light little car with all-wheel drive really gets the job done. And it's a Grand Tour. It has a 200 mile per hour speedometer, but it's comfortable, it's luxurious, and somehow Porsche was still making air-cooled cars and competing with the big dogs in Italy in 1997 and 1998. Up front, we're on the iconic Turbo Twist, an 18-inch wheel with a 225 section tire up front and a 285 section tire in the rear. Remember, it's a rear-engine car, so you want a bit of meat in the rear for those tires. The best thing about this car, though, is just this wide body. This fender is incredible, and I love the shape of this whale tail. You really have to kind of hit it from all angles to appreciate how meaty and ridiculous this is to have come out of the factory. Now, this car has a bit of a better stance than we're used to seeing on these cars because it's lower. We are on a coilover and lowering spring setup. I don't know the exact details. I'll try to put them in the description. And the exhaust is a fab speed, very emblematic of the time. That's a period correct aftermarket exhaust. Let's take a look in the back. Ooh, those hood struts doing work here. Not much to see here because the turbo has an air-to-air intercooler that pretty much blocks your entire view of this engine, but you know, you can peer in and see your fan and air conditioning compressor and some things like that. But that's about it. If you want to check your oil, oh boy, you've got a snake way back here. So there's no real easy roadside maintenance on this car. You're probably going to spill some things. I do love this rear wiper and the way it sort of moves like this when you need to get it up out of the way, if you're clearing things off, and it comes through the glass. Very cool. And then we'll take a look up here at our frunk, which, you know, if you're used to air-cooled 911s, this is all very, very familiar to you. We do have hood struts on this, unlike in the 964 Carrera RS that we drove. And then we've got this beautifully carpeted frunk, which is nice. And in here, what do we have? A 6 CD changer. I'm not sure everyone watching this video knows their way around a 6 CD changer, but there it is. And one really subtle thing I loved about these cars was just these paired up windscreen wipers. They're so close, they sit right together, and they do look pretty cool in motion. We're not gonna be doing that today though, because we've got a beautiful fall day with nice crisp air to get maximum boost from our turbos. So inside we do have 4 seats, although the rears are Kinder seats. And for the most part, you would likely be using this reclined flat as a deck, so it doesn't say turbo enough times in the car. You've got to add another turbo mat on top of the turbo seats. But yeah, for me, this is just a really reasonable daily driver sports car that gets the job done. And again, I think it's so wild that these were in use. An air-cooled 911 in 1997 still seems wild to me. I get it going up through the 80s, but they really stuck with their guns with this 993. which is maybe why Porsche ran into severe financial troubles at that point. But they're still just heat exchangers in the exhaust because there is no coolant. There are no heater cores to go circulate hot coolant through the cabin and blow air through. So there's actually just heat exchangers in the rear, which a lot of people, when they modify their exhaust, they don't want to pony up the extra money for heat exchangers and then they lose their heat. That's no good. So let's start it up and take it for a drive. First, you're going to notice this is like the worst. This is the worst key ever. This is really bad. It has a flip up key and it's this really cheap kind of plastic and it's got an immobilizer on it. So when we come into our left hand ignition, we'll turn it, hit the immobilizer, starts right up. We still have that nice crisp close of these doors. We always like that vault-like feeling that we get out of these 911s. And there's a bit of a cubby here, which is great. So this is convenient for 2022 because now you have a safe place to put your phone without it rattling all around. We still have our floor-mounted pedals, just like we've had in 911s of the past. That's what we like to see. I will say, the first bit of throttle is a little tricky. So getting it off the line, I've had to think a little harder than maybe I'd like to, but it's not impossible. It's pretty easy to drive. Now for 1997 and 98, there was some upgrades on this car for reliability and longevity. So the input shafts on the transmission for this all-wheel drive system are beefier than they were in 1996. I assume people were doing some pretty nasty launches and making some pretty expensive warranty claims. Revs drop very fast. This is a pretty sporty little car. We do have power seats, which is a bit of a luxury, somewhat unnecessary, but I'll take it. These ones are outfitted in extra plush leather, which was a little more expensive than it would have been without. But hey, add-ons is a hallmark of 911s, and this one would have cost just about $114,000 new. Not bad. It's quite a rocket ship. This thing really moves. And by today's standards, saying 400 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque wouldn't really wow anybody, but this is a light little package, and this is a small car. Remember, the 993 is not a heck of a lot larger than my G Model 88. It's this cool. This is what you want to daily drive. This is incredible. So it does have power steering. Power steering was introduced on the 911 and the 964 generation. Not available on most of the Carrera RSs, at least the left-hand drive RSs that were produced. But it did make the car a heck of a lot more approachable. And I think that's probably that turning point in the market where people are looking for their sports cars to also be like really functional and usable. To have not had power steering in these cars in the 90s would have been a pretty big mistake on Porsche's part for anything other than, you know, the track special models. This 3.6 liter feels a heck of a lot more refined than air coolers I've driven from earlier models. It seems happier down low. It's a little less clunky and rattly, especially in that like 1500 to 3000 RPM range. It feels like it's a more usable thing versus like a race car that you're like, wow, you'll only use it down low in the pits. feel that front end hooking up a little bit. Power. Delay on the turbos, but nothing scary. There's not like a big shunt. It is wild though, having all-wheel drive in an air-cooled car. Man, I feel like getting this thing to hook up properly and being like a real snow beast as well with this all-wheel drive system is really cool. Let's get it out on the highway and see how she cruises. Digging the gearing. Third gear's a little shorter than I anticipated, so I did have to go for fourth there, which is kind of nice that like it's ready to boogie. Oh, look, another yellow car. How nice. Check on the license plate. Very cool. Don't know why I got so excited about an Audi TT. That's fine. It's also cool to have a 6-speed in this car because, you know, I'm used to a G50 in these air coolers. So having a 6 gear is pretty neat. So the throttle in this car, it reminds me a bit of the Carrera RS in the sense that it's just a little bit disconnected. Like, I'm putting my foot down, it's giving me what I want, but I'm not like 100% sure it's gonna do exactly what I'm asking it to do, especially in the first little bite. And that's where I like really appreciate some of the older air coolers, like my 911 is an 88, and I feel like that car has a lot more throttle control than these cars do. And I don't know if that's just because they were going into some different electronic systems or whatever, but like there's just a tiny bit of disconnect. It's not egregious, it's not unforgivable, it's just noticeable if you've driven a ton of these cars. I feel like I gotta nurse it off the line just a little bit. And even though the steering is light, I still get all the communication, for the most part, that I was getting in the older cars. I mean, it's by no means the visceral feel of a manual rack, but I don't feel like I'm confused by what's going on. It's still a lovely steering system that does the job. But keep in mind, the Turbo is a GT car. This is a luxury car as well as a very fast Autobahn burning sports car. It's gotta be a lot of things. It's hard to make those compromises, so you're not gonna get sort of that like RS vibe out of this car. Nice and slow through this school zone. I don't think we can blend in very well in a bright yellow Porsche. This gear selector is a little bit, I don't want to say vague, but it's a little slushier, or I guess just not quite as like ratchet, you know, direct as some of the other cars that I've driven, including my own. There's a little bit of play in it, but like you can tell it's intentional play. This car has 10,000 miles on it, so it's not like it's worn. It's just that you can tell that they were aiming for a certain segment of customer in this car, and they didn't want it to be a brutal beat you up experience. And it's kind of blowing my mind that you could even take an air cooler and make it drive this well, this refined, this damped, and still be usable as a sports car. This is very cool. Sitting here idling, the car isn't like rattling all over the place. A lot of times these cars sound broken. She ain't slow, I'll tell you that much. This is pretty cool because just like 911 turbos of today, it's fast, but it's not fast in a scary way. It still delivers the power very predictably and in a way that makes you feel like it's just there to get you to the speed safely, and and like in a refined manner that you can't believe you could pay money to go this fast without panicking. It's incredible. Kind of impressed with how light this flywheel feels as well. And that could be a result of the throttle mapping just like really being in tune, but it does feel like those revs climb and descend rapidly. And look at that, like kind of coming out of a second gear, slow speed. It's not falling apart. It's giving me that power. The car doesn't feel like it wants to die. Some of the older air coolers definitely don't enjoy that, and they let you know when you add any throttle. Really love the effortless torque that this car provides on the highway. I mean, look at this. I'm starting to believe that 200 mile an hour speedo. And I like that even though I'm in kind of a small car, it's bright yellow, so hopefully people see me coming. I think what I find so incredible about the Porsche 911 is that you can have basically the same car for decades with variants of the cars from RS models to turbo models that feel completely different yet always familiar. It's a really fine balance to make a car that I'm used to, my RS Tribute 88 air cooler, which feels visceral, raw, loud, it makes all kinds of noises, it beats you up, it's hot. And then get in this and feel like you're in a plush, luxurious, sporty daily driver. And yet the underpinnings are all very similar. I mean, obviously there's improvements between G models out to the 993 days. This has a multi-link rear suspension. But what's just incredible is that you can take that foundation and just continuously improve and change and market to different segments of people. I think I'm just most struck by how calm this is and easy to drive it is. I don't feel like I'm getting beaten up at all. It makes me want to just have like the Porsche 911 solution to everything, because there's a car for literally everything, from going to a spec series race to drop your kids off at school. I mean, how wild is it that one car can be literally all things to all people? And I'm glad it's narrow enough still, even with the wide body, that I don't have to worry too much about giant trucks crossing a yellow center line. The 993 really is the end of an era for Porsche, because the 911 was air-cooled up until this point. This was the last air cooler, and once financial troubles hit, now they're out making Cayennes, and the 996 comes along and it's water-cooled, and in a lot of ways it's a better car, but it doesn't quite meet the expectation of the purists, and everything changed. But what's beautiful about Porsche is that they did, for the most part, stick to their roots, and they utilized the Macan and the Cayenne and the Boxster and the Cayman to fund the incredible projects for 911 that would eventually become the GT3 and the GT3 RS, and some incredible things that they ended up doing. 911s kind of always sold in similar numbers. So, you know, this wasn't like great bread and butter, and they did have to compete with the rest of the world. But if you're a Porsche purist and you've got a collection, chances are you've got at least one 993, whether it's a turbo or a Carrera 2 or a Carrera 4S. You've got to have one of them in there, because this is the end. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.